How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez here on Wrestling Observer Live. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sundays, 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern. We got a very busy show here today. As everybody is well aware, the trial of the century has wrapped up. The CM Punk, Colt Cabana, Dr. Christopher Amann trial. This is from the front page of WrestlingObserver.com. The jury in the case of Dr. Christopher Amann versus Phil Brooks and Scott Colton ruled that neither man were liable for any damages against the WWE physician in the defamation lawsuit. Jury only took 2 hours to deliberate. Punk and wife AJ Lee began crying in court when the verdict was read. Amann was stoic. Amann's attorneys were asking for $3.989 million in damages, claiming $1 for every listener of the Art of Wrestling podcast that the Punk show supposedly had. Punk's attorneys noted that WWE's medical records were not reliable because they never listed any of Punk's antibiotic prescriptions, and that the plaintiff's argument from WWE doctors that there was no lump was ridiculous, given 4 witnesses coming forward who described it in detail besides Punk. Key to the case appeared to be the testimony of Punk's massage therapist, who described the lump in detail, and of his wife, who said she noticed it starting at a zit-like size in August 2013, and it grew and changed color over the months. While there was no proof the lump was a staph infection, let alone MRSA staph, as Punk had stated on the show, the jury evidently felt that Punk either misheard the doctor or his exaggerations did not damage Amann's professional standing. Today on the show, after this first commercial break, Colt Cabana is going to join us fresh out of the courtroom to discuss this case, and we'll talk to him about that, his career, and his new book, Wrestling Dreams. Colt Cabana, professional wrestler, has written a children's book, so we'll talk to him about that. This show available also today, video.f4wonline.com, so if you want to check it out on beautiful 1080p HD video, you're welcome to do that as well. But Colt's going to join us after the break. Mike Sempervive as well. Going to be a packed show. Back in a moment. Wrestling Observer Live. Back here in the show, Brian Alvarez here. Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. Very happy today to be joined by Colt Cabana, fresh off the trial that ended yesterday. Colt, how you doing today?
Court, how are you doing?
Right off the bat, I mess everything up. Can you imagine?
I'm fresh off the trial, right out of that suit, and I am sitting in my underwear in my apartment in Chicago.
Now, are you watching judge shows now that you're sitting back at home, or are you done with this for good?
Oh, you know what's funny is that, and we'll get into everything, but I had this offer from Judge Mathis to make a show that he wanted to produce, and I had dinner with Judge Mathis where he bought me like a $70 steak.
I want to do a whole show just about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a perfect world, that's what we were going for. It seemed to not get picked up, but I'm very familiar with my judges now, obviously.
So what was he talking to you about? Can we get a couple of details, or we don't want to spoil this in case maybe this still happens?
Oh no, he wanted. Judge Mathis has this unreal production thing going on in Chicago, and part of that they gave him his own production team, so he wanted to make outside projects. So
I see.
Yeah, it was something that it was kind of funny. I don't know if I want to say what the premise was because I don't know if I'm allowed to, but basically they were they wanted a wrestler, and he basically told me he couldn't get John Cena, so they found out about me.
That's like Colt Cabana.
Yeah, exactly.
John Cena.
Man, I've been attaching my wagon to the wrong person, Brian. I thought you were going to get me somewhere, and I've been trying to hang out with Judge Faith. I didn't know Judge Mathis and Colt Cabana would be where it's at.
Well, listen, Court, let's start out with this today. Okay, so obviously, we've been talking about this case on this show, on the Observer Radio show, and as we've sort of joked, this is not available on Court TV. So there are some people in the courtroom, they're writing notes, we're reading the notes, we're trying to figure out what is going on here, what are they talking about, he never put an egg on his butt. It's just it's very difficult to try to figure out what's going on here. So I want to give you the opportunity here, since you were there, some of the misconceptions that we may have had about this whole case.
Yeah, and I want to, I really don't, because I still kind of have my panic button on, or what I can and cannot say, and or what I want to say about the doctor or whatever, but I'm more than happy to help to answer your questions. So it's not necessarily about me coming to you with all the information, but I guess all the stuff that you wanted to know. And I'm like I said, I was I was listening to a lot of the coverage that you guys did, and I would hear, I'd come home from the courtroom every day, and I'd hear some stuff, and I'd be like, oh, that's so wrong. But it's not my place to start getting invested in that. But now that this thing is over with, I know one of the things that I guess that you were really up about was the doctor's other practices.
His other practices. Oh, as far as outside of WWE, yes. Yeah,
and so that came out really early in the court that he doesn't have another practice. He to the best of my knowledge, and I'll keep saying terms like this, is that he only works for WWE, so he doesn't have patients outside of the WWE. So that's his only job. So none of that would have been affected. There was nothing to be affected.
Yeah, it was interesting because at the very beginning, obviously, as we've been talking about, it is a defamation case, and so the question becomes, what were the damages to Dr. Aman? And very, very early on, I mean, actually, even this had nothing to do with the trial. This was just something that I'd heard elsewhere online. This comment that people had about, well, his insurance premiums, his malpractice premiums, they all went up. And I thought, well, okay, if that's true, okay, if that's true that this podcast occurred and all of a sudden he was paying more in his premiums in his outside endeavors, then maybe there's something there. But then it turns out that, as you're noting, he didn't have an outside practice, number one. Then other people were talking about how, well, everybody's premiums have gone up. And then, I don't even know, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, I don't know if this was ever even mentioned a single time in the trial. Is that true? It was never mentioned?
I mean, well, my team, my lawyers and Punk's lawyers, we said, has this affected, one of the questions, he wanted to bring up that he was with the U.S. Soccer team and that he did the Olympic soccer team. And so the big question was, has this affected your standing with those companies? And he was like, no. And so that was the only, outside of WWE that, questioning, has this affected anybody? One thing that wasn't, I guess, brought up was, I think about maybe 6 months ago, he had that claim in the lawsuit, the claim of, it hurt my outside things or my premiums, all that stuff. And then he dropped that out of the case, to the best of my knowledge. That's my best memory. Is that was a part of it, and then it got dropped, and then the only thing was the defamation. But there was that other part that eventually got dropped by his side.
So, we were talking yesterday about how it's going to a jury, and you never know what a jury is going to decide. They could decide anything. So there's no open and shut here. But I do know that when we were talking about him being asked, did this hurt your standing in WWE? Do you feel that the wrestlers are looking at you any differently? And his answers were no to all of these things. I mean, it seemed like, well, what do we have here? It seemed like this was the end for him at that point. Was there a point where you sort of felt, based on something that happened, and obviously the jury can decide anything, but was there a point where you kind of felt, okay, I think we have this right now?
I said to myself, I think we have this right now, when my lawyer and Punk's lawyer got very excited over him saying HIPAA, and then them coming out with the, them being able to introduce the the NXT wannabe group text chat that saw him and Jericho talking about Punk's medical relationship. And I've never seen, my lawyer goes to me, he goes, watch this, kind of cocky a little bit, but he's like, you're going to want to see this play out. And I was like, ooh, all right. And then, and I saw my lawyer and Punk's lawyer, I saw my lawyer say to Punk's lawyer, no, you can do it. Have fun. They were going to see who was going to bring this up on cross-examination. So that was the thing that I saw, where my lawyer said, this was a home run. This is a great thing for us. But afterwards, and I didn't know if you knew about this, I didn't know about this, is that the jury comes out, they shake everyone's hand, and you're allowed to talk to the lawyers and the jurors. So we were kind of getting an idea of what everyone was thinking. And, a big thing that the main gist that we kind of got was they all came out and said, "I can't believe you were in this," to me. That's what all the jurors said. That's what they all said to me. They said within 5 minutes, we were all questioning why you were even in this lawsuit. But a lot of them said that when they saw that the doctor was kind of giving out pills and then admitted to giving out pills, and then there was this big evidence sheet that said no medical history, and it was like Phil Brooks, no medical history, and then he had just admitted that he had given him these prescriptions, and there was conversations between the two doctors talking about what they've given him, and that was a big tip off, I think, for the jury that maybe he wasn't trustworthy or whatever.
Now, going back to you here very quickly, we've got a couple of minutes here before the commercial break. I mean, it's universal. Why is Colt Cabana involved in all of this? I mean, you hosted a podcast, and you gave CM Punk a platform. And
I still host the podcast, right?
Well, of course, yes. But, I mean, the point of all of this is, like, you were the host. It's obviously, I'm a podcast host here, and I'm giving you a platform here today. I mean, it was sort of like this guy interviewed somebody, right? So maybe the guy exaggerated something, maybe he didn't. We don't know, but like if he did, why are you going after the podcast host? I mean, do you feel that some of this was just like, when they came after you to take it down, you didn't take it down, so they're like, man, we're gonna get this guy? Or why do you think they went after you?
And his little friend too.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it was they couldn't believe I didn't take it down after the cease and desist. And, and I think I got some kind of, I don't know if it's bad advice at the time, but through a lawyer, but, I believed the story and I didn't think anything I did was wrong. So, I was like, why would I take it down? Plus, Punk's my friend and this is his story and it needed to get out in the world. But also the relationship between Punk and myself, especially the years before that, was so well documented. And, this is all speculation. I wouldn't know, but I feel that he was so hated by so many people that if they could, you can easily legally tie me into this if you want to. And so the people want it to, I think.
All right, well, stand by. We'll pick this up after the break. Back in a moment, Wrestling Observer Live. Back here in the show, Brian Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live, Mike Sempervive, also WrestlingObserver.com. Colt Cabana joining us here today, a lot to talk about. And Colt, you mentioned, there's plenty to talk about, not even 4 years. There's decades worth of stuff to talk about if we have time. Now, you mentioned that you may have had some bad advice from an attorney early on. And I guess question one, did you stick with the same attorney throughout all of this process over the last 4 years?
No, and I guess that's something I kind of don't want to go into, but at the end of the day for this trial, my attorney was Kerry Stein, and he was a pit bull, and he was amazing. I couldn't have been happier. And, if you read through those reports, like, the doctor's lawyer, that closing argument was over an hour and a half. It was like a movie. Punk's closing argument was about 40 minutes. My guy was about 8 minutes. Like, he was like, listen, these guys are so bored. This jury just wants to not, why are we boring them? Here it is. He's not guilty. This is why. This is ridiculous. This is why I'm done. And afterwards, one of the jurors asked for his number so she could use him if he ever gets in trouble.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, not like that. He's a 7-year-old dude, but
sure, yeah.
A couple of them all came out and they were like, you were my favorite. They were picking favorites.
Now, feel free to say no comment here, because I know you don't want to talk too much about it, but do you feel that when you were first served this cease and desist and etc., that if you just pulled the podcast, like, you would have been uninvolved with all of this?
I mean, that's hard to say. My gut says, my gut says yeah. But nobody knows.
Sure.
And I felt strongly that I hadn't done anything, and Punk was, had the right to tell his story.
We kind of, obviously, being this type of show, we've had a little bit of fun with this, during the days and everything, and we're not exactly Ashley Banfield here asking, court questions or anything like that. So we've had some fun with it, and we talked about it at the beginning. Obviously you've kept your sense of humor and all of this stuff, but it has been 4 years, and this has been a headache for you for a long time, and I'm sure it has cost you money and time and a lot of, internal pain sometimes, not only for you, but for your friends that are being dragged through this whole thing. I mean, I guess in hindsight now, I'm sure you're relieved, but what has this been like? And, I mean, how many times did you bang your head up against the wall just being frustrated with this process?
Yeah, so I don't want to make this necessarily a plug for my own podcast, but it kind of ties in. I've changed my style of podcasting to where each week I now kind of, because I live this crazy life. I'm still on the road. I was even traveling during this court case to New York City to do commentary for Ring of Honor. So I'll grab my friends and we'll just kind of talk about what's happening each week. And for those of you who maybe stopped subscribing to my podcast 4 years ago, there's an episode where I go to China and I document the whole process of wrestling in China, and I'd recommend that one. But this week, the episode that will come out tonight, is I document my process of going through this trial. Every day I kind of, talk to myself and how I'm feeling. And one of the big stories, I think, of it is that I couldn't believe how much my body was rejecting just everything. And since my body's still hurting a little bit, but my mind, I like to think I'm a positive guy, and I try to live this stress-free life, and I just want to have fun. And I was telling myself, like, I'm fine. I'll just get through this, whatever. And my body was telling me the complete opposite. And it really, it almost to the point where I was nauseous every day. My body was shutting down. I was getting sick. And I really didn't expect that. So for the past 4 years, I've done my best to just keep it, just to really be, just, hey, when this comes or what happens, it just happens, and that's life. I like a big term. I forgot who taught me it, but it was called a life tax. So, when I was so broke and I get a speeding ticket for $150 that there's no way I could afford, you'd sit, you'd cry about it, but someone kind of taught me this idea of a life tax. Like, it's just, we're living life, and this is just part of the deal. These are the things that they'll come forever, and you just pay it and you move on. So that's kind of how I was looking at it with these lawyer bills and just the idea of having to go to meet with these people, and just all of this stuff was just a life tax, and that's kind of how I still look at it.
How has it been, and you don't have to delve too deep into this, but the other guy that's been paying this life tax has got a fight coming up here on Saturday. How, from your point of view, how has Punk's mind been through this, and should Mike Jackson be afraid for his life that Punk is going to get out all of his frustrations come this Saturday night?
Yeah, it's something I was thinking about too, and we talked a little bit about it, but I was thinking, I bet, in my head, I'm saying, I bet he's going to use all this to just, pummel a dude. But then, I saw what my body was doing. And then that kind of scared me for the idea of, I wonder what his body is going through. I think there was a lot more on the line for him with this. This case was a battle between two people. And I think for some reason, I was just kind of thrown into it. And that's why, you read, and definitely I looked over, and I wasn't crying, when they said, the jury decided in my favor. I was kind of like, yeah, of course. This is what I've been saying all along. But I looked over, and he's in tears. And then he goes and, he hugs his wife, and they're in tears. And so you can see just how much of an emotional reward it is for him. And I think, he got this whole relief when he got it off his chest the first time when we did episode 226. And then it just, if everything you thought that was awful that happened to him before that he had that relief that he can get off his chest 4 years ago. Now, quadruple it and add lawyers' fees and add all of this stuff. And so now this was just like another, that relief. And hopefully he is at a great place in his mind right now and can move forward in this fight. When he said he was training twice a week or twice a day, I don't know how. I mean, I was a wreck. I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't do. I'd come home right from the court case, and I'd try to eat, and I'd go right to sleep. So more power to him.
When I listened to his podcast, the podcast 4 years ago, I mean, my very passionate thought at the time was that this guy's never going back to WWE. And for 4 years, people have been talking about how, oh man, someday everybody comes back. Someday this guy's going to come back. So then he ends up in court for 4 years. And still, when the court case is over, I see people online going, oh man, now he's going to eventually go back for sure. And to me, it's like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
This guy absolutely had no desire to ever go back 4 years ago, and then a 4-year court case, and now you think after all that he's going to waltz back in at some point? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know. No one knows, obviously. The guy could decide whatever he wants, but I mean, I think there's no chance this guy's ever going back to WWE. I don't even know if he's ever going to wrestle again. He said he never wants to wrestle again. Colt, obviously, you've been wrestling forever. You love it. It's a passion. You wrote a kid's book about it we'll talk about here in a second. What do you think about CM Punk ever wrestling again? Forget WWE, ever. At some point, do you think he's ever going to work again?
Well, I think you can never say never, right? That's the idea of it. But I think WWE is out the window, especially. It's kind of sad. But they're both so stubborn. Both of these, WWE and Punk, and I think that's why this thing went to trial and nothing was ever settled. Neither of them were going to say that they were wrong. And at the end of the day, it was so nice to hear that. We were right. I can't speak for wrestling other places. I just know that WWE made him fall out of love with wrestling, and this trial couldn't have done any favors for it. I always say that we started together in 1999, basically, and. Even though his career obviously skyrocketed and went way past where mine was in terms of fame and fortune and all those aspects, I always look back and I think to myself how happy I was that the thing that we both loved and wanted to do never made me hate it. And I've always been in a position where I've never hated wrestling because of wrestling, and that's what happened with him. And I think it's a big win for me that I still have that passion. I still love going out. I still love wrestling. I still love taking my dates, and I still love traveling the world. And it's I'm in my 20th year now. It's 19 years later. So,
well, hold that thought. We'll talk more about that when we come back from the break. Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Brian Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. Colt Cabana is joining us here. When the light turns on, I'm on. I can't promise anything when that light's off. Colt.
Hello.
Yes. You were talking you were talking about a life tax earlier. And I want to kind of steer this in a positive direction after all of this.
Well, I was gonna say something, and I wanted it to kind of be in a positive direction, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want it to kind of be known that my intention, and I never wanted for people to tweet this doctor these things. It was never my intention, and it kind of upset me when it was happening. And Punk might feel differently, but that never was the intention. And I know people are doing it now, and I just like to say if you have that if this made you angry and you have that feeling, take that energy and instead of negatively tweeting at people, positively tweet at myself or Punk or the lawyers who did such a great job, or even your favorite wrestler or something. I just like for people to take that energy and use it positively instead of negatively.
You mentioned the life tax and in a very, very difficult 4 years, and obviously a lot of legal bills and such. I mean, do you sort of wake up today and just go, man, I'm rolling now. You've got bookings, you've got everything else, you got no legal bills to pay. I mean, do you sort of feel like, man, now I've made it?
It's like that was a monthly bill that I would get, and just like I wouldn't cry, but I mean I was close, and so yeah. Well, I still believe me, this one's going to be a lot. But after this month, yeah, it's all in the green, in the black, in the red. I forget which color means good, but it's all.
I think you're going to be in the black.
Yeah, the right side of the.
Hopefully, you'll be in the green, but you'll be out of the red.
Yeah, right. Out of the red. I'll need some green. Correct.
Yes. Now, yesterday, I didn't want to. I mean, I was just. I tweeted yesterday, Punk wins, because you guys had won. And like everybody was all excited about it, and they're tweeting and they're posting on our board and everything like that. And I really didn't want to bring it up, but I mean, it was sort of like, I don't know if you guys understand that, like, they won, but Colt and Punk, they're not seeing a dime that they spent over the past 4 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to bring it back to a negative sort of thing right here, but I want people to understand that you paid all of this money and you won. But it's not like you got all that money back. It's not like you got an actual judgment or an award of some sort. I mean, it's over now, but all that money is gone.
And that's why, like, when I heard it, and I was like, yeah, of course we won. But I didn't see it as much as a victory as everybody else did. It was a small victory. I don't have to pay this man $7.78 million plus punitive damages. That was nice to not have to pay that. But it isn't some giant victory party. My life savings is chopped away at, so it is what it is. And yeah, all right. Somebody asked me after the trial yesterday, what advice could you give people moving forward? And I'd give the same advice my attorney told me, was to get insured. So.
You had mentioned that. I saw a video that you did yesterday to get insured, and
yeah.
I mean, what exactly does that entail? I mean, I've never. Are talking like become an LLC, or is there podcasters insurance, or?
Well, yeah. The first thing that the lawyers came to us was like, what's your insurance? So essentially, what happens is, your insurance pays for the lawyer bills, and that's kind of why the lawyers are happy to make that much money, and why it'll go to settlement, because the settlement money won't come out of anyone's bank account or pockets. It'll come from these insurance companies. So I think everyone was a little thrown back when they found out neither of us really were that insured. And it's a big life lesson for me, and it's one of those life taxes.
So you mentioned the toll that this took on your body, and you've got I'd say it's a tour coming up. Brendan Burns and Colt Cabana do comedy and commentary to bad wrestling matches.
Yeah. I do so any fans over in Europe, I do the Edinburgh Fringe Festival every single year. This is my 6th year doing it. It's the largest arts and comedy festival in the world. And we have it's like a 75-seater, and we do the same show every single night. I won't say the same show, because we've always played different clips, but we do this show where we come in, we're there, we're making jokes, that we're watching kind of wrestling, and then we have guests. And in the past, Hannibal Buress has came and done it, and Ronnie Chang from the Daily Show, and just so many people over the years have come and told jokes about wrestling with us, and it's such a fun show. And I invite everyone to come if you're in Scotland this summer. It's August 3rd through the 27th, and all the information's on my Twitter.
3rd through the 26th, it says right here.
26th, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be there the 27th. I'll leave on the 28th.
Sure. So is this like? I mean, what do you see yourself as now? I mean, you'll always see yourself as a professional wrestler, but I mean, is this the sort of thing that, like, this is kind of what I want to move into? You're 38 years old. Obviously, you could still go for quite a while, but I mean, how does your body feel? I mean, now that this is all over, do you want to go stronger into wrestling, stronger into comedy, kind of a mix of both, or what are you feeling?
Yeah, I just like to keep my schedule busy. To be honest, it's the only thing I've known for so long, and the schedule I keep now, which is kind of crazy, it's anywhere from 8 to 14 wrestling shows a month. This is a schedule I've done for the past 19, 20 years. So, obviously I love the mix of the world of comedy and wrestling. And so I just love any way I can do that. That's what I'd like to do. So whether it is doing improv shows, over in Edinburgh, or doing some stand-up or acting on shows or commentating or wrestling, anything, it's just, I like being a part of it and I like doing it.
I want to ask you very quickly about the podcast. You mentioned that you have changed it up a little bit, and it's very impressive, actually. I mean, if I had been hit with a $7 million lawsuit, I probably wouldn't even do podcasts, but you've barreled on through with this. And was the change in the podcast format a direct result? If I recall correctly, it was only a little while ago that you changed the format. So, I mean, was it somewhat a result of this, or was it sort of like, I've been doing this for a long time and I want to change, and I think this would be an interesting way to do it?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time and I wanted to change. And when I first started, the wrestler-to-wrestler conversations in the locker rooms, it was 2010. And at that time, I was listening, and I was very influenced by, Maron and the Nerdist, and even Jimmy Dore, and a lot of these comedians. And as time has gone by, my podcast interests have kind of differed a little bit. And so a lot of people have told me that my new style of podcasting is very NPR-like almost, or documentary style. So, there's a lot of shows out there, like a lot of the Gimlet shows and 99% Invisible and Radiolab and This American Life and these style shows that I'm really into. So I kind of thought, like maybe I can move my show into that idea. And also, what people I think always loved about it was my interaction with my wrestling friends. So this still gives you the same interaction with my wrestling friends, but just in a different format. And yeah, I just thought it was time to change it up. And, I said to myself, if no one listens, I'll just stop it, but if people still listen, I'll still be able to kind of continue doing it.
You've done the visual, you've done the audio, and now you've gotten into authoring as well, too. Let's talk a little bit about the Wrestling Dreams book, which came out, and unfortunately, I guess, has been overshadowed because of everything else that's been going on. But now that you get a chance to focus back on that and being able to sell it over Pro Wrestling Tees.
Yeah, well, it's available on my site, I think, most importantly, coltmerch.com. But it is at Pro Wrestling Tees, yeah, and it's at Barnes & Nobles, and it's at, I guess, Walmart, but, I see the best profit from coltmerch.com. I wrote a children's book along with Erica Weiss, and Erica has hooked up the Young Bucks, and now they're going to put out a book, too, and so, it's kind of my little story, and hopefully, Brian, you perused through it a little bit.
I have.
Yeah, and I think it's just a nice thing that, like myself and you, we were obsessed with wrestling as a kid. And if you ever want to, share that love of wrestling with a child, ages 3 through 8, this is a great starter. It's a kid's book. It's colorful. It has a very nice message, and it's all about wrestling. I can imagine both of you guys, like when we were kids, there was like maybe one book in the library. There were.
Oh man, if you were lucky.
Yeah.
Right. I just remember there's this one book, I think Missing Link was on the cover. There were just pictures of all the wrestlers. That was it. And so, to be able to have something like this for children that I would have wanted as a kid, I feel great about putting it out.
Now, was this the story of your life as a child, Colt? I mean, were you a young feller and the neighbors told you to stop doing all this stuff, and you had two buddies, Sean and Marty, and you ended up just following your dream? I don't want to spoil the book, everybody. I apologize for that. But, I mean, was this essentially how things were for you?
I mean, to an extent. Obviously, the Rockers weren't my childhood friends.
No.
I wish. I mean, they were in my mind, right?
Sure, yeah. Well, let me ask a question differently. So,
sure.
When I was a kid, I did all this stuff, too. But I never really had anybody telling me, don't do this. I was doing assemblies and all of this crazy stuff at school, and nobody ever told me don't do it, okay? So this is obviously a kid's book, and you're trying to teach kids a lesson of, whatever you want to do it. So I guess my question to you is, was that message in the book just like because it's a kid's book, or when you were growing up, did you actually want to do this stuff and you had parents and neighbors and teachers just telling you, Colt, knock off this wrestling stuff?
Yeah, of course. I had people laughing at my dreams all the time. And you know, as much as truth is, like, my mom was always so encouraging and was happy to have me, playing around with my friends and diving off the roof, trying to emulate, Mick Foley like we all did when those tapes came out, on Raw. And that was just the reality of the situation. It's, of course.
Now, going back to the podcast very quickly, I mean, you changed the format and you said that, if it doesn't work, we'll just stop. So obviously it has worked. I guess the question would be, have you seen more, a two-part question, have you seen more downloads with the change in format, or has it stayed relatively the same? And if you have seen more downloads, do you think maybe some of that is because of everything that sort of revolved around whatever fame you have derived from this trial?
Well, I mean, I think just the last day is, I've never seen so much positive feedback, ever, I don't think. And it's been amazing, and it's been so nice to read through, and I'm trying to keep up with everything. And so, I'll be able to see, I guess. I think that the numbers, I think what happened was, in the beginning, I was the first person to kind of do this show that I was doing. And then all of a sudden, a lot of more famous wrestlers kind of came into the space. And I was able to keep the core audience who really dug what I liked or what I was doing. And that's the core audience I believe I still have today. It wasn't about who was my guest. It was about the idea of listening to me and my adventures. And so that's who I hope I have today, and that's who I believe I have today. And so now it's kind of fun. It's like I'm rebuilding now. Like, I have a nice core audience. And so hopefully people will listen to this new style of show, and we'll build it slowly but surely. And that's kind of what I did originally.
Well, stand by, hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment. Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Brian Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. Colt Cabana joining us here today. ColtCabana.com is the place to go, the website. At Colt Cabana on Twitter. And obviously the podcast, The Art of Wrestling, and the book, Wrestling Dreams by Colt Cabana. All of this can be found at his website. And Colt, let's get some plugs in here for dates and comedy and wrestling and the whole nine yards.
Yeah, I've got a lot of upcoming events, and I like, come out and see me live. I love wrestling live in front of a live audience. This weekend, Wrestle Pro, I'm in Jersey. I'm wrestling for Chikara in Philly. I'm going to be doing the Legends Convention in the morning Saturday. AAW, June 23rd, Beyond Wrestling, June 24th. I'm going overseas in Dublin and London doing Over the Top and Revolution Pro. I'll be in Los Angeles doing bar wrestling. I'm going to be doing my podcast at the Starcast during All In. I'll be at All In, who knows in what capacity. I hope wrestling, but if not, I'll be doing commentating because I'm the commentator for Ring of Honor with me and Ian Riccoboni, and he's amazing. And watch ROH wrestling. Get the app is the easiest way to watch ROH, because I've had some difficulty in the past. But download the app and join the Honor Club, and you should do it. Also,
dude, the Honor Club on Apple TV is awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's how I watch it. And let's give a shout out to Marty and Sarah, who love wrestling and have a podcast about it. And you should be their buddy.
That's
hey,
right.
Colt, give Mr. Latoris our regards, please.
Oh, yeah. Mike, did you have to?
Well, and I hope everything came up that you guys wanted to know about. But when they brought up that name, and we were like, "That you're bringing up that tweet? What are you doing?" And then it was repeated all after that because our lawyers found it hilarious.
All right. Well, Cole, I want to thank you so much for doing the show here today. We're out of time, everybody, every day, Monday through Friday, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sundays, 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern. Thanks, Colt, Mike, everybody in the studio, callers and listeners. Talk to you again tomorrow. Wrestling Observer Live.